We live in a world that frankly just never stops talking. I mean, think about it. Every single day, your brain is absolutely bombarded by notifications, expectations, and just this relentless, exhausting noise of the crowd. But what if the ultimate secret to taking absolute control of your life is actually found in complete silence? Welcome to this explainer on the sovereignty of solitude. Today, we're diving deep into the science of self-mastery to show you exactly how to turn isolation into your ultimate superpower. So let's get right into this.
So be honest with yourself for a second here. Is being alone just a waiting room for you? Society has completely conditioned us to view solitude as this passive, lonely pause. Like a temporary glitch between your last social interaction and your next one. We literally grab our phones the second we're alone in an elevator, right? Because we're terrified of just existing by ourselves for 30 seconds. But treating solitude like a waiting room, that is a massive missed opportunity. It keeps you playing defense, always waiting for the next thing to happen to you, rather than taking charge of what happens within you. Let's completely flip the script on this concept. Solitude is definitely not a punishment. It is a highly desirable, active state. Entering solitude intentionally is hands down one of the most potent levers you have available for cognitive rewiring and self-mastery. It's a tool, a literal mechanism you can pull to take absolute control of your life. When you stop looking at being alone as this empty space that just has to be filled and start looking at it as an active training ground for your mind, man, everything changes.
And look, we aren't just talking about abstract philosophy here. This actually builds into the physical reality of your mind. When you intentionally step away from the exhausting, demanding crowd, this incredible biological process begins to unfold. Your brain literally changes the way it operates when it doesn't have to constantly process the chaotic environment around you.
Right at the center of this is a really fascinating neurological system called the default mode network, or DMN. Now, this is the region of your brain that lights up when you're daydreaming, reflecting on your life, or consolidating your memories. It's where your deepest, most profound thinking happens. But here's the catch. When you're constantly surrounded by people and noise, your DMN gets completely hijacked by external stimuli. You're stuck reacting. You're processing other people's opinions, managing social friction. You're just constantly on external defense, which leaves zero processing power for your own internal growth.
So, what actually happens when you step into solitude? Well, the source material frames this perfectly. It says it is the neurological equivalent of clearing your browser's cache. Let's just slow down and let that sink in for a second. Think about a computer that has 100 tabs open. The fans are spinning, the battery's draining fast, and yeah, even those 47 tabs of unread articles you swore you'd eventually get to. That right there is your brain in a crowd. Stepping into solitude allows your default mode network to finally switch off that external defense and move into internal integration. You hit refresh, you clear out the junk data, you finally give your mind the space it so desperately needs to process, organize, and just breathe.
The really crucial point is what happens after you clear that cache. Because there's no social pressure to conform or perform, your brain literally drops its baseline cortisol levels, your stress hormone. When that stress just evaporates, it creates the absolute optimal neurochemical environment for deep focus, long-term planning, and serious emotional resilience. You aren't just relaxing on the couch, you are physically upgrading your brain's capacity to handle the world.
All right, now that we've got a handle on the brain chemistry, let's shift gears and look at the psychology side of things. We're moving into a concept known as shedding the invisible audience. This is all about the profound, incredibly liberating freedom of being completely and utterly unobserved. Because whether you realize it or not, when you're around others, you are almost always putting on a performance.
This brings us to a brilliant framework from psychologist David Riesman. He coined these two terms, other-directed and inner-directed personalities. Most people, unfortunately, are totally other-directed. It's like their internal compass spins wildly based on what the room thinks, feels, or expects of them. They're constantly adjusting their course just to please the crowd. But solitude? Solitude forces your compass to recalibrate. It strips away all those external magnets, allowing you to become inner-directed, where your true north is finally determined by you and you alone.
When you spend enough time completely unobserved, this major breakthrough happens. You stop rehearsing your life for an invisible audience. Just think about how much of your precious energy is totally wasted filtering your thoughts, adjusting your posture, and shaping your ambitions purely through the lens of other people's approval. Solitude kills that imagined audience. You stop asking, what will they think of this? And you finally start asking, what do I actually want?
Now, how do we actually go about building this inner direction? Well, here is your actionable roadmap to true intrinsic motivation. Step 1, set a goal. Step 2, sit with your own thoughts. Absolutely no distractions allowed. Step 3, execute the work in silence. And step 4, which is definitely the most important one, validate your own wins. True confidence does not come from positive reinforcement from the crowd. It comes from self-efficacy. It's that quiet, undeniable, powerful proof that you can go through these 4 steps without needing a single clap from the audience to feel successful. You literally become your own source of validation.
Once you lock in that internal compass, a massive power dynamic shift occurs in your social life. The source material calls this the paradox of availability. When you become entirely comfortable being alone, something really incredible happens to your boundaries. You completely stop negotiating them out of a fear of isolation. You stop saying yes to things you absolutely hate just because you're terrified of spending a Friday night all by yourself. Because think about it. If you can't be alone, you fall victim to the scarcity principle of attention. People who cannot bear solitude are chronically available, constantly seeking validation, and incredibly easily manipulated by peer pressure or FOMO, that fear of missing out. When you need the crowd to feel whole, the crowd literally owns you. They control your schedule, your energy, and your peace of mind. And honestly, it is an exhausting way to live. But when you master solitude, you flip that dynamic completely upside down. When you genuinely enjoy your own company, your very presence in a room completely changes. You no longer enter a space looking for someone to entertain you or validate you or fill some sort of emotional void. Instead, you enter as a sovereign agent. You are whole before you even walk through the door. And that calm, centered detachment, that is exactly what the rest of the world perceives as unshakable, magnetic confidence.
There is this really profound truth in the source material. Solitude is not the absence of company, it is the presence of self. That right there is the ultimate reality of self-sovereignty. You aren't missing out on anything when you're alone. You are finally meeting yourself. You're stepping into a space where your true self can actually be present, loud and clear, without the static of the world drowning it out.
And hey, here is a truth bomb to remember the next time you feel overwhelmed by the social noise around you. The loudest voices in any room, the people constantly demanding attention and validation, are usually the ones who are completely terrified of the silence. Constant noise isn't a sign of strength, it's a sign of fear. They need the crowd because they just haven't done the work to be comfortable with themselves.
So that brings us to the final takeaway from this explainer, and it's a challenge aimed directly at you. Are you ready to master the silence? Because let me tell you, when you learn to master the silence, you master the room. Unplug, step away from the noise, clear your mental cache, and discover the absolute power of your own sovereign company. It is entirely yours for the taking.